this isn't really me putting out a video where I say a thing. It's me trying to think out loud about stuff. I'm a huge believer in the phrase, what do I know what I think until I hear what I say? A new friend recently introduced me to someone called Alok, who is a speaker, author, thinker, activist, who is gender non-conforming or gender variant, which is a phrase I hadn't come across before, added to my vocab. And this new friend of mine kindly sent me a bunch of YouTube videos of Alok for me to watch, and I spent the night drinking red wine and watching videos about gender and queer theory. And it has triggered some thoughts. In particular, I watched an episode of a podcast that they recorded called, the podcast was called Man Enough, and I had some thoughts about the slightly earnest namaste style of the presenters, although there was some reconciliation there. But what Alok had to say was, an astonishingly articulate, powerfully terrifying articulate person who, I started taking notes, but then I just couldn't keep up because every sentence was a thing you should think about for days. So I will go back and rewatch it. There's a particular part really that I wanted to focus on where Alok talked about for people who are who hold power in society, and that's basically me, right? I'm middle-aged, middle class, affluent, cisgender, white, male. For people who hold power, one of the most freeing things you can do, and this wasn't quite how Alok put it, but it's how I'm putting it right now. The freeing thing you can do is to cede that power, and I completely agree with that. Something I've thought for a long time. It's an increasingly strident part of my thinking about gender, sexuality, socioeconomic power, everything else. Ceding power is freedom. I recently recorded a couple of episodes of a podcast for a wedding magazine, and it was talking about queer issues. It was basically a pride thing, although the recording didn't happen in Pride Month, and the episodes I don't think are out yet. And I was talking about a broad umbrella of queer issues from the point of view of, I guess, heteronormativity, like marriage we can discuss, but still in the West feels very heteronormative, very man and woman getting married. But they had me on, and I was kind of doing my token queer thing of talking about a bunch of queer issues and getting slightly punchy about some things. In the weeks since I recorded that, it has come round in my head a few times. What happens when those episodes drop? Shall I share them? How do I share them? How do I direct people who are interested in what I have to say? I'm stumbling because it sounds like I can command a vast audience hanging on my every word. I don't mean that. I just mean like, if you're following me on socials or I'm talking to you in the pub and I direct you to this, I'm thinking, what do I think about the things that I said to direct you to them? In particular, I have a particular experience of being part of the queer community, but on this episode I was kind of encouraged to, and I did take on the role of talking about other people in the queer community. And the hot button issue just now is trans people or gender non-conforming people. So I talked a little bit about that. I was careful to centre the experiences that have been told to me by people who are trans and GNC. But at one point in particular, having centred the experiences of one friend in particular, I suddenly stopped myself. I hope it'll make the edit to say, this is not my story to tell. It's her story to tell. I should stop telling it. I spoke a little bit about asexual people and aromantic people. I spoke about people, basically about people whose identity whose experiences aren't mine. And I remember coming out of the recording, we recorded 2 episodes back to back, thinking, I wonder how I did. I wonder if my queer community would be proud of how I represented them, how I created space for their conversations to happen. And the honest answer is I don't know. These things always pass in a bit of a blur. I think I did okay, but I'm not sure. And there's, by the way, some huge irony in me centering my experience in this conversation, right? This is a conversation, or at least the thing that's been happening in my head is a conversation around dismantling the gender binary and love and compassion rather than understanding. It's about a whole mess of stuff that is not a damn thing to do with me directly, with the obvious caveat that it affects every single damn person. It's everybody's fight, but it's not me. But I'm centering myself in this conversation. I guess it's a natural human thing to do. I have, since doing some work to understand better the thing I can do well, talked openly a little bit about spending my privilege. I am afforded a lot of privilege. I can spend some of that and elevate others. I worry a lot about the rhetoric of that, of me sounding terribly pious and saying, I'm woke. By the way, maybe now's the time. People being accused of woke, I don't dare call myself woke. I don't dare. At the very most, I understand A, what the word means, and B, that it is necessary to do that work, to be aware of injustice, and then to take the next step of fighting injustice. But to throw woke at somebody as a slur is nuts. And if somebody threw that slur at me, I don't think I would take it, not because I don't think it's a thing to be proud of, but because I don't have the hubris to think that I could in any way, that I have done enough work to understand the implications of calling yourself woke. Anyway, in all this conversation, I still think it's important, however much I think about it, however poorly I think I'm doing it, and it will be messy and it will be imperfect and it will fall below the standards I set myself, never mind the standards that others have a right and a expectation to set on my behalf. But it is important that when you look like me and you have my economic and social power, political power, that with as little hubris as you can and with as much understanding that you have to balance the joy of living your life with doing the hard graft and working shit out and dismantling the stuff that needs to be dismantled, heteronormativity, patriarchalism, class subjugation, the things that we talk about. However badly I do that, I still have to spend some time creating space for others to tell their story. Now, all of which is to say, as I was writing down some notes, which are below the camera here, to have this conversation with myself, it occurred to me that the friend who introduced me to Alok, I don't know what their gender identity is. I don't know what labels they would choose for themselves. Certainly neither man nor woman. I don't know whether they would choose to call themselves gender non-conforming, gender non-binary, gender variant. I don't know. But here's my revelation for this video, and it is: all the way through that thinking, I thought, all the way through that process of writing, of experiencing the videos from Alok, of thinking about stuff, of being energized and worried and disenfranchised and re-enfranchised, and thinking about recording this video, as I got to that point where I thought, I don't know what labels my friend uses, I realized, is that rudeness? Is that a lack of care and basic decency? Does it bespeak a a dehumanizing part of me to not have even asked them what their pronouns are and what their gender identity is? Or is it a mark of growth that it doesn't matter? It may not matter. Putting somebody in a box marked gender non-conforming, non-binary, gender variant, gender fluid, gender flux, putting somebody in yet another one of a conceivably infinite number of boxes is not the solution. The solution, perhaps, is to dismiss the very notion of boxes altogether and just to encounter people one-to-one and get to know the person rather than a label. Labels are powerful. I've spoken about labels before, but perhaps the fact that I don't know my friends' labels isn't a mark that I don't care about them. Perhaps it's a mark I care about